We're going to continue our discussion this morning. So we took a break last week. We had Brian Hood with us. He came and preached and shared with us a little bit about his church plant in Hernando, Mississippi. But if you remember back before that, we had started our series on our core values. So what are the core values that we hold as a church? What are the things that are going to be most important to us as Starkville Community Church? And today, we're going to hit on another one of those, and our core value this morning is going to be worship. So we'll go ahead and throw it up here on the screen, but I wanted to show you guys. So if you go to our website, you can click on, I think it's what we believe, and you can see each of these core values, and you can see kind of the statements that we have on what we believe and why we believe it. And so go ahead and throw it on the screen there, what we have. So on our website, it says this. It says, our gatherings must honor God rather than please people. We commit to pursuing substance over style and authenticity over an attraction in our worship gatherings. So I'm going to leave that up on the screen for a little bit. But this is kind of what we're hitting on this morning. And so we're going to be talking about worship. What is worship? We're going to look at that. We're going to look at who do we worship, and we're going to look at how do we worship. And I want to go ahead and read Psalm 96, and then we'll jump into it. So, starting in verse 1, Psalm 96, it says, "O sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the people are worthless idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him, strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Yes, the world is established, and it shall never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar, and all that fills it. Let the field exult, and everything in it. Then shall all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness, and the peoples in his faithfulness." I'll pray for us, and then we'll jump into it. God, thank you so much for this morning, God, and I thank you for the time we do have to come here and to worship you, God, through song and through the preaching of your word, and pray that you would just hide me this morning, God, God, that you would just have us to hear what you would say to us through your word. We ask it in your name. Amen. All right, so have you guys ever heard the saying, life is 10% about what happens to you, and it's 90% about how you react? I don't know, you've probably heard that before, but I couldn't figure out, either Chuck Swindoll was the first one to say that, or Lou Holtz. I couldn't figure out who was the first one to ever say that, but they were both quoted having said that. But I think there's a lot of truth to that. You know, you think about it, so much of our lives are about how we react to things that happen to us, you know, because so much of it is out of our control. But we can control how we react to the things that happen to us. And so I say this, just a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town called Caledonia. It's about 45 minutes northeast of Starkville, and you have never been there unless you are specifically going there, probably. But anyways, I grew up there. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house growing up. They lived on a road called Etoy Lane. And Etoy Lane, just to paint a picture for you, Etoy Lane was about this mile-long dirt road, and on it is probably, I would guess like, I'm terrible at this, but probably like 100 acres worth of land, probably about 10 houses, and it was all my family. You know, I had my grandparents, uncle and aunt, great uncle and aunt, a great grandma here, another uncle and aunt in the back here, and so it's just this massive, just kind of compound of the Buchanan family, which was my mom's parents and her side of the family. But my gosh, I spent probably half of my life at my grandparents. They partially raised me, and so I was there, during the summer, every day after school, and so me and my cousins, we would just get out and play all the time. And we had this trampoline. And I don't know about y'all, when I was little, I was big into WWE for a couple years, which, looking back, I'm not real proud of. But I was into it there for about 2 to 3 years. And my favorite wrestler was The Undertaker, which kind of scary guy. But anyways, I loved it. And so me and my cousins, we used to get on this trampoline that we had, and we would have these WWE showdowns, man. And I remember one day we were going at it, me and my cousin Caleb. Some of you probably know him. He's been here before. But we were going at it, man, and we used to have, it would be me, him, my cousin Matt, and maybe 1 or 2 more cousins, and we like to do it tag team style. So 2 people would kind of get up on the trampoline, you'd go at it, and when the other one kind of had you down, you could reach out and tag your teammate in and go get a breather. But anyways, me and Caleb were going at it one day, and something happened. I can't really remember. I think I either attempted to do a tombstone power driver on him, which, if you've never seen that, that's the Undertaker's special move, and it sounds as crazy as it is. But anyways, I can't remember if I tried to do that and he got mad at me because essentially that move is attempting to ram your head into the ground. But, or either there was a time when I pinned him and my cousin was counting down because, if you pin him and count to 3, the match is over. And I think there may have been a discrepancy with, was he really down for 3 seconds? Anyways, my cousin declared me the winner. And, I started boasting, and I was turned around flexing and all that. And before I knew it, my cousin, just in a rage, he came behind me and he shoved me. My foot caught the side of the trampoline, and I twisted and just fell on the ground, and boom, and it knocked the breath out of me. And I laid there for probably 10 seconds. I'm pretty sure I cried a little bit. I was probably 6 years old. Anyways, I laid there for about 6 seconds, and then once I kind of caught my breath and came to, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to kill him. So anyways, I take off chasing him, and he jumps off the trampoline and he runs, and he was faster than me at this point. I'm faster than him now, but back then I was a little pudgier, and he outran me. But anyway, I probably chased him for 10 minutes until I gave out. But I think he eventually came home, and we probably made up. But anyways, what's my point in sharing that? So that day I learned a couple quick lessons in that moment. One of them was pride comes before the fall. So I was over there flexing, and before I knew it, boy, I fell hard. 2 was my cousin I didn't, and my cousin did not really react well in that moment. And I certainly didn't react well after he had pushed me and I got up and literally was trying to rip his head off. But anyways, we didn't really respond or react well that day on that trampoline. So why did I share that with you? So as we're talking about worship this morning, kind of the truth I want us to see when we think about what really is worship. What does that mean? What does the Bible say it means? Worship is really just about response, particularly our response to God. And so I want us to see this morning that worship is our appropriate response to who God is and to what He has done. Worship is about response. If you look in verses 2 and 3 of Psalm 96, it says, "Sing to the Lord, bless His name, tell of His salvation from day to day, declare His glory among the nations, His marvelous works among all the peoples." And so these verses here, they recognize who God is. He is the Lord. And they recount some of the mighty things that He has done in the past. And Wayne Grudem puts it this way. He says, therefore, genuine worship is not something that is self-generated or that can be worked up within ourselves. It must rather be the outpouring of our hearts in response to a realization of who God is. And I love that quote. And so this morning, why is it so important that we have a correct understanding of what worship is? Well, because in John chapter 4, we're all familiar with the verse that God says those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. But also in that passage in 21 through 24, God talks about that he is seeking after those people that would worship him in that way. And so God is seeking after worshipers that would worship him truly. And so if we're going to do that, we have to know, how do we truly worship him? And we want to be, I don't know about you, but I want to be someone that God is seeking after the type of worship that defines my life. And that's what we want to be as a church. And so it's important that we know what worship is also because it's the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is the ultimate goal of the church. John Piper said this in his book, Let the Nations Be Glad. He said, missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Worship is. Missions exist because worship does not. Worship is ultimate, not missions, because God is ultimate, not man. When this age is over and the countless millions of the redeemed fall on their faces before the throne of God, missions will be no more. Go on to the next slide there. Yeah. Worship, therefore, is the... I lost my spot. There we go. Yeah. Worship, therefore, is the fuel and goal of missions. It's the goal of missions because in missions, we simply aim to bring the nations into the white-hot enjoyment of God's glory. And so that is why this morning we must understand what worship is. We must understand that it's why we're here. It's the ultimate goal of the church. And that's why worship must be one of the core values for us to start with Community Church. And worship has to be one of the core values for us as individual followers of Jesus. And here's the thing, though. I think in Christian culture today, I think we've had sort of a disconnect somewhat when it comes to how we think or how we view worship. And what I mean by that, well, worship is so much more than just singing a song. It's so much more than just an isolated event that we do on Sunday in a building. Because isn't that what we tend to think about when we hear the word worship? You hear somebody say, hey, we're going to have a worship service tonight. What do you think about? Oh, we're going to come sing some songs. There's nothing wrong with that. Singing is a form of worship. But I want us to kind of broaden our definition this morning and understand that worship can be done through singing, but worship is so much more than simply just singing a song or just coming to a service on Sunday morning. And I feel like most of us know that, and we've probably heard it, but do we really live like it? Do we seek to worship God in our daily lives, or do we just leave it to these isolated, kind of consolidated events that we come to? Because my fear this morning is that our worship has become a little too tied to how is the music and how did it make me feel? You can sing a song and not be worshiping God at all. You probably knew that. And you may kind of gasp when I say that. You can sing and not be worshiping? You can also sing and have an emotional response and not be worshiping God. How do I know this? You can turn on the radio and listen to any secular song, and a lot of songs make us emotional. I can sing a love song to my wife. I did yesterday in the car on the way to Caledonia, and it made me emotional, but I hope that did not equate or mean that I was worshiping her, because obviously the Bible is very clear that God is the only one that's worthy of our worship. And so, I want us to see that emotion does not automatically equal worship, because worship was never meant to be just an emotional showcase or just an emotional response. That does not automatically equate to worship. But on the flip side, worship was also never meant to be empty. It was never meant to be ritualistic. It was never meant to be devoid of any feeling or emotion. So I want us to kind of see that balance there. I'm not saying there shouldn't be emotion, but I'm saying that, we have to understand that emotion is not the end game. Worship is the end game. Sometimes that is emotional. It should probably be emotional when we truly worship God, but it's not always the case. And on the flip side, it's not meant to be empty. In fact, the context of Psalm 96, you can actually read 1 Chronicles 16. So this was a specific event that happened in the Old Testament, and the Ark of the Covenant was being transported to the city of Jerusalem. And David was here. He was kind of heading this up, and it was a very happy, joyful, triumphant time. And in fact, Scripture talks about David actually danced so hard that his wife was embarrassed. Been there, done that. I know how you feel, Dave. Anytime I dance, my wife's probably embarrassed. But my point is that it was joyful, it was emotional, and that's okay. Worship should be it should be full, it should be real, and because of that, sometimes it will be very emotional, and that's a good thing. In fact, Psalm 50 kind of also talks about this. Psalm 50 says, "Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds, for every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. The world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High." So what is this passage saying? God's really saying, you're doing all these things. I see it. I don't want that. God says, I want a sacrifice of thanksgiving. I want you to give thanks, and I want you to give a heart sacrifice is basically what this is saying. God was saying he was tired of the empty deeds and the sacrifices and all these things that they were doing, but their hearts were far from God. Jesus also addresses this in Matthew 5:4. He says that this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. And so I want us to see kind of the balance here this morning. Worship, emotion does not automatically equal worship. And I think sometimes we tie emotion too much to worship. At the same time, our worship was never meant to be empty and devoid of any feeling. And, I would say this morning, I hope that when lost people come into our church, I hope when they leave our services that they think, that God seemed real to them by how we worship, how we sang, how we preach the word. Even if they leave here and they don't necessarily believe in God, I hope that when they leave here they say, I still don't know that I believe, but I know that they believe that God was real, and I could tell by how they were worshiping. They worship God like he was real. And so, I want to see that emotion, not necessarily bad, but we shouldn't tie it too much to equate automatically to worship. It's just a byproduct when we rightly respond to who God is. And so we're really talking about here, what is the inner essence of worship? What does it really mean? And it comes outward in a lot of ways, but what should be going on inside in our hearts? It does not matter what you do on the outside if your heart is very distant from God on the inside. In fact, Jesus says that you're not even worshiping at that point. And you can do as many religious deeds as you want, come to as many church services as you want. You can sing and have as many emotional responses as you want. But the problem is you could do those things and your heart still be so distant from God that you're not even really worshiping. And so that kind of leads me to my next point. So, what we've kind of talked about, what is worship? So next question is, who do we worship? And you may think, we worship God. I know where this is going. Can we just kind of fast forward to the end? But do we really? Do we really worship God? Or has worship become more about us, more about our preferences, more about what we like than it has about God? Verses 4-5 say, "For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols, but the Lord made the heavens." Worship is not about me, it is about God. Worship is not about you, it is about God. Worship should not be directed toward what I want, toward what I desire. Worship should be directed toward what God would have us to do. And so here's what I'm getting at this morning. You know, when our worship becomes more about an emotional experience than about focusing on God, or when our worship becomes more about what makes us feel good than about focusing on the Word of God, at that point, who are we really worshiping? We're just here for ourselves. We're just seeking to be entertained. We're not really here to think rightly about who God is and to respond to Him. You know, if we're more concerned about what we like or what makes us feel good. And I've heard this. You know, I've heard this play out a number of times. Just ask somebody, you know, hey, how's church this morning? I promise you, I've heard responses like, it was okay. I didn't really like the songs today, or it was all right. The preacher wasn't really funny, and, you know, I kind of, you know, I didn't really care for the way he talked. Those people did not come to church to worship God. They came to church to be entertained. And we don't want to be a church like that. And so that's why we're talking about this morning. That's why we need to understand who we're worshiping, and it's God. And you know, we're not going to be a church that just leads songs. We want to be a church that leads people to God. We're not going to be a church that's concerned with having state-of-the-art technology or equipment. We're going to be concerned with what the state of your heart is. We're not going to be a church that's focused solely on generating emotional responses. We're going to be focused on generating life change that comes from truly worshiping God. That's just who we're going to be as a church. That's why worship has to be one of our core values. And if we lose some membership numbers because of it, so be it. You know, it would be better for us to lose a little bit of numbers than to be worshiping in a way that's really not leading and pointing them to God. You know, we would be worse off. So we're gonna seek to please God and not please people. And that's who we're gonna be as a church, because worship's not about you, it's not about me, it's about God, because He is the only one that's worthy of our worship. And I'm thankful we have a great worship leader, we have a great worship team, and they're good. They sing really good. I'm thankful for that. That's a gift. But they're not the reason why I'm here on Sunday mornings, and they shouldn't be the reason why you're here. God's the reason why we're here. We're here to worship Him and no one else. And there's another account in Scripture. I actually had never read this until I started studying this, but just also thinking about, you know, not even the angels are worthy of our worship. And here in Revelation 22, it says, I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said to me, you must not do that. I'm a fellow servant with you and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. Even this angel that appeared to John bows down to him and begins to worship him. The angel says, whoa, get up. It's like, no, like we worship God. We're with you. We're on the same level you are. You worship God, not me. And so anything else that we could ever attribute worship or praise to other than God is absolutely worthless. And that's why our worship has to be solely about God, not about ourselves or anything else. And looking at our final point, number three, how do we worship? So how does this play out? We've talked about what is worship truly? What's the inner essence of worship? Who do we worship? Okay, so now how do we worship? The Bible describes worship in three different forms primarily. We see physical expressions. In fact, in the Old Testament, when the word worship used, the most used, form of it or variation of it was literally to bow down or lay on your face before someone else. We also see acts of service, and we also see it described in attitudinal expressions, or, you know, your heart or your attitude toward God. So, you know, we see words used for worship throughout the Bible to mean those things: to bow down, fall on one's face, to kneel before someone. We see it used in reference to serve or to work or to minister to We see it used in the sense of to fear or to revere something or to be in awe of something. And so looking at these different ways that the author describes worship in Psalm 96, we see in verses 2 and 3, says that sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation from day to day, declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among the people. We see there, sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation, declare. We see these different ways that our worship is expressed. Also in verses 8 and 9, we see ascribe to the Lord glory, do his name, bring an offering, come into his courts, worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness, tremble before him, all the earth. We see these different expressions of worship, and they're all the same end goal. We have, it's okay to have these different forms and these different expressions, but so long as we understand what the end game of our worship is, and that is to worship and honor God and to respond rightly to who he is and what he's done. And so I guess my sermon in a sentence this morning maybe would be this. So we must move away from the idea that worship is what we do on Sunday. Worship is a manner of daily living. I'm going to say that again. We must move away from the idea that worship is what we come to do on Sunday. Worship is a manner of daily living. Romans 12:1, Paul talks about this. He says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. What's Paul saying there? Your life. Paul's calling us to sacrifice your life, your time, your energy, everything you do, you lay it down in an act of worship to God. So worship, I want us to see that worship was never meant to be an isolated event that only occurs during a service on Sundays. Worship truly is to know and realize who God is and to respond to him. And this plays out in my life. It should play out in my life every single day in a multitude of ways, in how I live, how I think, what I do, how I act, how I respond. So that, those are the different ways in which we worship, but the essence never changes. And so as we start to wrap this thing up this morning, I want us to take a look back at the very first verse in Psalm 96. And I want us to see here, it says, "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth." I'm sure you've probably seen that term if you've read the Psalms. You see that term, sing to the Lord a new song. What does that mean? Sing to the Lord a new song. Well, it doesn't mean that's not a biblical basis to do away with all old songs. It's not what it means. It doesn't mean that we should just not sing older songs. But the point here, what it does mean, is that it's not enough to just remember the past. Many Psalms point back to God's mighty acts of redemption throughout history. You take the Exodus, for example, where God broke the chains of the Egyptians and freed the Israelites. And God then instituted the Passover so that Israel would never forget what God did for them in delivering them from their oppressors. But yet, we see all these mighty acts that God has done in the past, but yet the same God, he also commands us to sing a new song in Psalm 33, Psalm 40, Psalm 96, Psalm 98, Psalm 144, Psalm 149. Why is that so important? This is why it's important, because God's mercies are not all centuries old. God's mercies are not all centuries old. Lamentations 3:23 says that they're new every single morning. Every single morning, God's mercies are new. And I just want to tell you that this morning, they're also new. And, God's with us this morning, and he wants us to sing a new song to him. He wants us to respond. His mercies are new this morning, and they're made available to you through the shed blood of Jesus Christ. And so that's kind of where I want us to wrap this thing up this morning. If the musicians want to go ahead and be making their way up here. I want to just allow us to have just a time of worship. I don't want this to be rushed. You know, I'll give y'all as long as y'all kind of lead us. But I just want to invite you to sing a new song to the Lord this morning. And we talked about that may play out in a bunch of different ways. That may mean that you just sing where you are this morning and you just think rightly about who God is and what He's done in your life. That may mean maybe you want to come up here and get on your face before God, bow down to Him. Maybe you want to stay where you are and just kneel and pray. I don't know what that is, but I just want to invite you to respond this morning. You know, the thing about God is you can't worship, or really anything, you can't worship or praise anything that you're not devoted to, or that you don't really know. So if you don't have a relationship with Jesus this morning, I want to invite you to do that. You can take that green card, the Next Steps card, and if you have questions about what it means to follow Jesus or what it means to be saved or have a relationship, you can mark that on the card and put it in the basket on your way out. And I promise you that one of our staff will get with you, and we want to talk with you about that. And for anyone else, you know, I just want to ask you, when's the last time that you really worshiped? You know, when's the last time that you literally bowed down, got on your knees, or fell on your face before God in worship? Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to be someone that just worships God or has those moments where I literally fall on my face before God just when things are terrible in life. You know, I want to be someone that worships God in the good times and in the bad and everything in between, because those are the kind of worshipers that God seeks. And I want to give you the chance to do that this morning. I'll be up here. I'm gonna kneel and pray myself. But if you want to talk or need someone to pray with, I'll be here. I'll ask Joe to just kind of be here at the front if you need to pray or talk with someone. But now's your time to respond.